Hello everyone, I'm Ronald and welcome to Romans 9:20. If you're new here, this channel is all about making the Bible not just accessible and easy to understand, but also deeply relevant to our lives. I dive deep into scripture, break down complex ideas, and explore the timeless wisdom within its pages, all in a way that hopefully feels like a friendly chat. Now today we're delving into three significant chapters from the book of Deuteronomy, chapters 21, 22, and 23. Now these chapters are a collection of random laws. However, upon closer examination, we uncover powerful themes about maintaining order in society, showing compassion to others, and building a healthy community centered on God's principles. These laws, though seemingly archaic, still hold relevance in our modern society, guiding us on how to maintain order, show compassion, and build a community centered on God's principles. But before diving into these themes in these chapters, it's crucial to establish the historical context. This understanding is key to fully grasping the wisdom and intent behind these laws. Now, Moses continues to deliver his final farewell speech, encompassing a broad spectrum of laws across these chapters. These laws, given by Moses, were designed for a society with different norms and challenges than our own. God isn't establishing a perfect society here. Instead, he is meeting the people where they are, providing a framework for a functional society where individuals are treated with at least the basic level of respect. For example, God's acknowledgement of multiple wives doesn't signify his approval, but rather his recognition of an existing practice and his provision of honorable ways to navigate such imperfect, sinful situations. We'll encounter some challenging passages today, and it's important to avoid imposing our cultural experiences onto theirs. One such difficult passage is the concept of marrying female captives. Now, for Western society today, this idea is highly uncommon. Even arranged marriages can infringe on our modern notion of love and marriage. However, it's vital to remember that marriage in this ancient society rarely aligned with our contemporary ideas of love. Women especially seldom married for love. Instead, it was often a means of provision. In this context, if the Israelites conquered a city, they would kill the men but spare the women and children. So some of these women would be integrated into society. Now, if a man desired to marry one of these women, she likely wouldn't have objected. This law, as God outlines it, honored the woman by granting her 30 days to mourn and grieve her loss before marrying the Israelite man. Furthermore, if the marriage deteriorated, God protected the woman by requiring the man to treat her with honor, not as his property. It's essential to recognize God's underlying intent here. Please don't miss God's heart in this. Despite the archaic nature of some of these practices, we can still discern God's plan to provide for the woman through the man and to protect her if the man failed to honor her properly. These laws, often perceived as harsh, actually demonstrate God's compassion and protection for the vulnerable in society. So let's get into it. Chapter 21, verses 1 to 9. We kick off with a somber scenario. This section lays out a procedure for when a person is found murdered in an open country and the perpetrator is unknown. Elders and judges of the nearest town are to measure the distance to the surrounding cities. The elders of the closest town to the body must then take a heifer that has never been worked and lead it down to a ravine with flowing water that hasn't been plowed or sown. There, they break the heifer's neck. Now the Levitical priests and the elders then wash their hands over the heifer and declare their innocence, asking for atonement for the unknown bloodshed. This wasn't about sacrificing the heifer for the sin, but rather a symbolic act of acknowledgement in the bloodshed and seeking atonement for the unknown killer. It was a way for the community to take responsibility even when a perpetrator was unknown, emphasizing the sanctity of human life. Next, verses 10 to 14, it discusses the treatment of female captives, as we've already touched on. Now, there were a few more specifics, such as the man was to bring her into his house, where she would shave her head, pare her nails, and put aside the clothing that she wore when she was captured. She was to remain in the house and mourn for her father and mother for a whole month. These regulations aim to protect the dignity of the captured woman and prevent impulsive or exploitative behavior, even in the context of verses 15 through 17. The chapter then addresses the complex family situation. A man with two wives, one loved and one unloved, and both have bore him sons. If the firstborn son belonged to the unloved wife, the father would not give the inheritance to the firstborn son of the loved wife simply because he favored her. He was obligated to acknowledge the son of the unloved wife as the firstborn and give him a double portion of all that he had, as this son was the first son of his father's strength. This law underscores the importance of fairness and justice within the family structure, ensuring that birthright inheritance are not solely based on personal preference. Verses 18 to 21, are you ready for this? It outlines a severe process for dealing with a persistent, rebellious, and disobedient son who does not listen to his parents' voice and is a glutton and a drunkard. The parents are to bring him to the elders of the city and declare this and his behavior. Now, if the elders find the accusation to be accurate, the men of the town are to stone him to death. This harsh penalty serves as a deterrent against extreme defiance of parental and communal authority, highlighting the importance of order and respect within the family and the community. Now, it's crucial to understand the specific cultural and societal context of this law. And finally, verses 22 and 23 conclude with instructions regarding a person who has committed a capital offense and is put to death by hanging on a pole. Now, their body was not to remain on the pole overnight, but must be buried on the same day, because anyone who has hung on a pole is under God's curse. This regulation emphasizes the need to respect the deceased, even those who had committed serious crimes, and to avoid defiling the land with a cursed object for an extended period. Now, it highlights the idea that while justice must be served, human dignity should still be considered. The specific laws of chapter 21 might not directly apply to our 21st century context, but the underlying principles remain relevant. The emphasis on taking responsibility for injustice, even when the perpetrator is unknown, speaks to our need for community involvement in addressing social issues. The protection afforded to the captive women reminds us of the importance of treating all individuals with dignity and respect, especially in vulnerable situations. The fairness of inheritance laws highlights the need for equity within families, and while punishment for the rebellious son seems extreme, and it is, the underlying principle is the importance of respecting authority and the consequences of persistent defiance. Now, today these principles can guide us in seeking justice, showing compassion, and fostering healthy family and community relationships. Deuteronomy 22 outlines a series of laws that guide the Israelites on how to be an adjusted and respectful community. In verses 1 through 8, it begins with a simple instruction. If you see your neighbor's lost property, whether it's an animal or an article of clothing, you are not to ignore it, but must actively return it. This emphasizes the importance of being a responsible and caring neighbor. Now, the chapter then shifts to an unusual law prohibiting a person from wearing the clothing of the opposite gender, a rule likely intended to maintain distinct gender roles and avoid pagan practices. Now, it then presents a surprising glimpse into the humane treatment of animals, instructing that if a bird's nest is found, you should take the young but let the mother go. This shows an early concern for conservation and respect for life. Now, the section concludes with a practical law requiring a parapet on a new roof. A parapet's a low protective wall along the edge of a roof. This law highlights the homeowner's responsibility to ensure safety and prevent accident. In verses 9 through 12, these verses provide three seemingly unrelated prohibitions: not planting a field with two kinds of seeds, not plowing with an ox and a donkey together, and wearing clothing made of two types of material. The reasons for these prohibitions is not explicitly stated. It may have been related to maintaining distinct categories, avoiding unnatural combinations, or perhaps symbolic of keeping the purity and distinctiveness of God's people. Several commentaries suggest that it had something to do with reminding the Israelites of the importance of being set apart from the other nations that don't follow Yahweh. These laws serve as a daily reminder of how they were to be separate. It's also worth noting that the passage mentioned not yoking a donkey with an ox together, but they also wouldn't mix two of the same animals with varying degrees of strength. Now, a yoke is a piece of wood that goes across the animal's neck to hold them together while they pull a plow. And if you have one strong animal and one weak animal, the strong one can move fast, but the weak one moves slower, and they end up going around in circles. So if you've ever read Paul's comment from 2 Corinthians 6:14 that says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers," That's what he's talking about. Paul doesn't want us to end up going around in circles, following Christ while yoked to someone who isn't, which makes it nearly impossible to move forward. Now, the remainder of chapter 22, verses 13 through 30, it deals with various aspects of sexual morality, outlining serious consequences for premarital sex, adultery, and rape. These laws highlight the sanctity of marriage, the importance of consent, and the protection of individuals from sexual violence. Now, the specific scenarios and punishments highlight the value placed on marital fidelity and the severity with which sexual offenses were viewed in ancient Israelite society. These laws aimed to maintain the moral integrity of the community and protect vulnerable individuals. Chapter 22 focuses on how the Israelites were to interact with each other and the importance of maintaining moral boundaries. We see laws about returning lost property, the distinctiveness of gender roles, protecting nesting birds, building safety measures, avoiding unnatural mixtures, and upholding sexual purity. Now, in modern day application, the principles of this chapter encourages us to be responsible and considerate neighbors, to respect the natural world, to prioritize safety, and to uphold moral integrity in our relationships. While we may not interpret the clothing laws literally, the underlying message about respecting distinct roles can prompt reflection on society's expectations. The emphasis on returning lost items encourages honesty and care for others' belongings. The compassion shown toward animals reminds us of our responsibilities as stewards of creation. The building code serves as a timeless reminder of the importance of safety and the law concerning sexual morality, while culturally specific, points to the enduring values of fidelity, consent, and the protection of individuals from harm. Verses 1 through 8, chapter 23, it begins with outlining who could be admitted into the assembly of the Lord. Now, this included a man whose testicles were crushed or whose male organ was cut off, as well as anyone born of an illegitimate union. Their descendants would be excluded for 10 generations. Ammonites and Moabites were also excluded from the assembly of the Lord forever because they did not meet the Israelites with food and water on their journey out of Egypt, and because they hired Balaam to curse them. However, Egyptians and Edomites could be admitted into the assembly of the Lord in the third generation because they were considered relatives and had offered hospitality in the case of Egypt. These regulations emphasize the importance of physical wholeness, the sanctity of marriage, and the way neighboring nations had treated Israel during their exodus. It highlights the concept of communal purity and the consequences of specific actions on one's standing within the community of faith. Verses 9 through 14 provide instructions for maintaining cleanliness within the military camp during wartime. Soldiers are to keep themselves holy and avoid anything indecent. If someone becomes unclean due to a bodily emission during the night, they are to go outside the camp and then wash themselves before returning in the evening. The camp is to be kept holy because the Lord your God walks in your camp to deliver you and to defeat your enemies. This emphasizes the importance of physical and spiritual cleanliness, even in the context of war, as a reflection of God's presence. Verses 15 and 16, this section commands, "You shall not give back to his master's slave who has escaped from his enslaver to you. He shall dwell with you in your midst, in the place that he shall choose within one of your towns. Whether it suits him, you shall not oppress him." This law offers protection for runaway slaves, prohibiting their return to their masters and allowing them to live freely within the Israelite community. This reflects humanity's concern for the vulnerable and stands in contrast to the standard practices of the time. Verses 17 and 18 forbid Israelite women from becoming temple prostitutes and prohibits Israelite men from becoming male cult prostitutes. They also state that no offering from the wages of a prostitute or the pay of a dog, likely a reference to male prostitutes, shall be brought into the house of the Lord your God for any vow. This emphasizes the sanctity of worship and rejects the mixture of religious practices with the worship of Yahweh. And the chapter concludes with verses 19 through 25 with laws governing financial and social interactions. It prohibits charging a fellow Israelite interest on a loan, reflecting a concern of social justice and preventing exploitation within the community. The text also stresses the importance of fulfilling vows made to God. Finally, it permits an individual to glean from a neighbor's vineyard or grain field to satisfy immediate hunger while respecting the owner's property. Now, this shows a spirit of communal support and care for those in need. So Deuteronomy 23 is all about keeping the community holy. It lays out who can join the group, how to keep the camp clean, protecting runaway slaves, banning temple prostitutes, setting lending rules, making sure vows are kept, and allowing gleaning. Today, this chapter reminds us about community belonging, upholding standards, being accountable, moral integrity, standing up for the oppressed, keeping sacred spaces pure, fair lending practices, taking promises to God seriously, and being generous. So in these chapters, we've seen a wide range of laws addressing everything from marital matters, interpersonal relations, to the holiness of community and the interactions within the outside world. In contrast, these laws were given to a specific people in a specific time. At the same time, some of the peculiar regulations may seem distant from our modern lives. The underlying themes of justice and responsibility and holiness remain timeless and relevant. They challenge us to think about how we live together, how we treat one another, and how we reflect on God's character in our world. Now, as we come to the end of these chapters, thank you so much for joining me. I hope this sheds some light on these crucial chapters of Deuteronomy. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might find it helpful. And please leave a comment below with your thoughts or any questions you might have. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Romans 9:20 for more video explorations of the Word of God. Until next time, God bless you and keep studying His Word.